Hello and welcome to another episode of Atomic Vinyl Reviews. My name is Jacob and today we are taking a look at the NECA Predator Jungle Hunter Ultimate 7-inch figure. So this is NECA's most up-to-date take on the classic 1987 Predator design in figure form. And strangely enough, this is actually my first ever Predator figure, which should come as a bit of a shock to everyone because I'm actually a huge fan of the Predator franchise and this design and everything like that, and always been a huge fan of Alien, and I have a bunch of Alien figures, and yet I've never actually got a Predator figure, which is really surprising to both myself and maybe you out there as the audience. But I saw this one listed recently when I was picking up a couple of other NECA Godzilla figures, and I figured, you know what? It's about time I freaking had a representation of this guy in my collection, and I think this guy was a really good place to start. One of the best things about these new NECA figures is that unlike the old clamshell packaging that they used to come in, they now come in really cool, fancy cardboard box packaging. So this is the box from this Predator figure. He's got a cool little red glowing close-up of the classic Predator mask. And if we look around the box, it's got that cool, very classic 80s movie text. Got the little NECA logo down there. And we've got around the back of the box, let me just lift the camera, got some information about the movie. Now, strangely enough, this box doesn't say anywhere that it's the 1987 Predator, despite it being so heavily implied with what they're writing on this little description here. Deep in the Central American jungle, the Predators hunting humans for sport. Blah, 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 and all that good stuff. And just, you know, this design is that design from that movie, so it's really strange that they don't identify him as being the Predator 1987 design or anything anywhere on the box, but they do call him Jungle Hunter, and I think anybody who's a fan of the Predator franchise knows that it's most likely the Predator from this first film. So opening the box up, because these boxes have a really cool feature, which is they do open up. And they have these clear plastic windows where, you know, normally you'd actually be able to see the figure in all his glory inside the box here. Now, when he came packaged in the box, he had a different head on him, because he actually comes with a bunch of accessories, like a separate little face with the mask on it, actually a separate little mask. Some little skeletal bits for this little trophies. We got this cool little skull here, and one without the spinal column, and little plasma caster blast, and a couple of extra hands, and he's got this plasma caster shoulder-mounted cannon thing, which also wasn't mounted on him when he was in the box. I changed him up a little bit from how he was in the box, just because I was playing around with him so I could get a good sense of this figure before doing this review. But normally he would be in this box, actually inside this little plastic thing that would slide in, and all these little bits and bobs would fit in here, and the figure would stand in the middle here, just to give you guys an idea. He does have a cool little jungle display picture in his box here, which is really neat and suits this figure really well. So I really like the packaging that NECA is going for this thing. It is really phenomenal, so good on you, NECA, with that. Well, let's move on to the figure himself. This guy is a really fantastic representation of the 1987 Predator. I think they really nailed the design and the sculpt and the paint job. It's all done really well. I have a couple of little minor nitpicks I'll get into in a little bit, but just letting you guys know, overall, I'm really happy with this thing, especially considering this is somewhat more of a pricier NECA figure. I still think you do get your money's worth in terms of the quality and the amount of Predator goodness you get with this figure. So let's start off by going through this guy's articulations. Predator has a very basic humanoid sculpt, so you'd expect that they should pretty much nail his articulation by this point, because, you know, humanoid sculpts are very common amongst action figures, so you'd expect that they would have that stuff down to a T by now, and for the most part this guy's articulation is really good. He's got double jointed knees and elbows, which do give you guys a really wide range of motion with those. You can bend his elbows like that on this side. Now I do have a minor issue with his elbow on this side, which has to do with this little bit of tubing which I will show you guys in more detail when we actually do a bit of a close-up later on, but that tubing does tend to restrict his elbow motion just a little bit. I'm really kind of nervous about messing with that too much, but in theory, you could also bend this elbow quite a lot as well, like this other one. His knees have a double joint in them, so you can get a wide range of movement with those. You can move his knees and his legs back together like this. He's got a ball joint in his ankle around here, so you can wriggle his feet around however you want. He's got these really weird feet with these weird sandals, which is really kind of a strange design choice for this predator, especially if just in figure form. You'd kind of expect if he had feet this big, he probably should have a bit of articulation just to kind of pivot up his toes a little bit, but unfortunately there's nothing there. But it does help him stand really firmly on the ground, which is really good for a bipedal figure like this to actually be able to stand on his own. And this guy can stand without a problem as long as you spend a little time just making sure he's balanced correctly. And look at that, no problem standing, even if I shake him around. So that's a really great thing about this guy. And I'm hoping long term that his joints stay stiff enough, even with a bunch of play, that he will continue to stand. But, you know, only time will tell. Whoop. Damn, there goes his little pistol thing. I was going to talk about this in a little bit, so we'll put that to the side for now. But just looking at his articulation around his body, he's got 2 points of articulation. Down his waist here, at his belt, he has a joint there with a ball joint, so you can swivel him around as much as you want, and you can get a little bit of an ab crunch in that area. About that far back, about that far forward, so it is kind of limited at that joint, but you can combine it with some more articulation just at his rib cage area, which is a little bit tighter, but you can kind of swivel it a little bit, so you can get a really nice natural swivel out of his body where it doesn't really break the sculpt up at all, and it looks really natural when you've got him turned, but his sort of ab crunch back and forward is fairly restricted, so you can get him go like that much back, especially if you use his hip joints here like that much forward. So fairly restricted, but it is there, which is good to see. Now, his body has a lot of soft plastic bits, such as his little cape thing here, and these metal armor bits around his legs here. These are all soft plastic, and a bunch of these little flaps around here. They're a firmer plastic, but still fairly pliable, so they do help to keep his articulation a lot less restricted. Same goes for his dreadlock hair, which is really well recreated, with each individual strand being a bit of soft, malleable plastic that can wave around, so that's really cool. But yeah, these metal flaps here do mean that you can get a lot of articulation from him at the hip, so you have no problem there, and you can give him a bit of the splits and all that good stuff like that. So it's got good deal of articulation for a figure like this, and you kind of want that because he's meant to be, you know, jumping around in the trees and stalking people and all that good stuff. Let's just bring him in nice and close to the camera so you can get a really good look at all his sculpt and paint application. And I think they did a wonderful job in this department. Now, I do have my minor nitpicks, as I was saying earlier, which I'll get into, but just overall, this guy really captures that classic 87 Predator design. He's got all the necessary details. The skin is textured and painted accordingly to how he was in the movie. He's got that lovely sort of tan color with these darker patches all over his body, looking really reptilian, kind of this weird skin texture. He's got these really menacing looking face with all this sculpted detail and these grooves and his big menacing fangs on this face in particular. And what I really love is if you look from a lower angle, you can see those little beady yellow eyes, which look so creepy, which is just how he was in the film. His big fangs here seem a little bit dark compared to how I remember them in the movie, though I could just be remembering it wrong, but I did look at some photos and they did seem a little bit dark. That's just some minor stuff, but my major nitpick when it comes to the paint application is these little joints here that hold his legs together. These little pegs in these joints aren't painted accordingly to how his body is. They're just white plastic, and they they do show through quite a lot. So even if they just had this as like a matte black plastic, I think that would have been a lot less visible and helped give this guy a much cleaner and more finished look. Though they're nitpicks, it is good to mention that, especially as this is NECA's like ultimate predator jungle hunter figure, so you'd expect a lot of quality out of this thing. But other than that, everything seems to be in order. Like, he's got really nice metallic detailing across all his armor and his little fist bomb thing where it actually opens up. So if I can do this on camera, there we go. Got his, it flips open. He's got his little detailing in there. The lid looks a little bit derpy with the joints. It doesn't look quite as refined as it could, but the detailing on the inside of it's all there and it looks really nice. And that's a cool little gimmick that you have on this thing. He's actually got his open hand here, which is the one that that I had to install later on because this was like an accessory. So he's got like I said, a couple of different hands, and these are done really nicely. He's got little gloves on, which look really cool. Got his sort of classic predator skin kind of tone, and these little speckles across his skin, which look really nice. And he's got these really cool dangling bits of skulls and vertebra and bone around him. These little trophies, which are accurate to the film, and they look really nice, done in sort of a very matte gray kind of a color. It's got this all these little wear and tear marks across his armor and across the metal plating. He's even got it on his mask. So he comes with a separate little mask here. So this is like a little loose mask that's one of the effect parts that he can just be holding. And unfortunately, on the back of it, it doesn't have any sculpted detail, so it's not really finished off on the back, which is a bit of a shame. But the front looks really cool, just like the actual mask that he has on his second head, which I'll be installing to show to you guys in a second, but you can see it there, looking really cool. Even got a bit of sculpted detail under here with a bit of texture for his chin there and all the dreads and stuff, so you can really get a sense of what that looks like. And these are really cool bits of sort of rubber for his hair there, looking really great with little gold detailing. Another little issue that I have is he does have a lot of these little pipes on him, and this one on mine broke off because it actually is meant to go into that little hole there on his shoulder armor, but unfortunately that did slip out. It does seem to be an easy fix. I could probably just do it with a bit of super glue and stick that in the hole there. It does have a little peg for there, but you got to be careful with that stuff. And like I was telling you guys earlier, he has this little pipe here on the back of his arm here, and I'm really scared to actually bend his elbow too far because I feel like that's already got a lot of tension on it and it's barely bent his arm. So I don't know, guys. I'm not going to mess with that too much. So his arm here is going to be pretty much straight for the most part for me. But like I was showing you earlier, this one here has great articulation. And this one's actually got his claws, the little knives that he has on his wrist. And these are really cool. You can actually pull out like that. They're just made of a harder plastic. They're very thin, so be delicate with those, but they're really cool and done really effectively. So that's a nice little detail there. He's got his little fist hand there. Looking really neat. One detail I wanted to go over as another little issue that I have with this figure is his shoulder cannon. On my one, as you can see, it's actually completely broken off in the course of this video, the little actual gun on it. So this bit on mine was extremely flimsy when I got it out of the box. It was just flopping, falling down constantly. It wouldn't hold up because it's actually meant to be strong enough to hold this little plasma cannon beam, which actually just kind of goes in like that. I wasn't gonna have him displayed with this, but it was meant to be attached to his shoulder like so, and to look like he was just shooting it. And while the beam kind of looks accurate to the movie, it does still look like a blob of plastic more so than like an actual beam, which is a little bit of a shame. But regardless, I'm a little heartbroken that this little gun here is a bit of a failed little piece. So I don't really know what I can do about that. I'll have to try and reattach it. This whole shoulder mount bit is actually detachable. It's not originally attached to the figure out of the box. the way you put it on and off is you kind of lift it up from the front here. It's got a little bit peg here that sticks into a little hole in his shoulder, and then you pull it down from the back. It's got a little hook there, and you just reverse that. You put the hook in and you press that down onto the hole, and that's how you'd attach it. But unfortunately, since that bit's broken off, I'm going to take it off for the rest of this review. You can see he looks pretty neat without it. He looks a little bit more lighter on his feet now without that huge chunk of metal on the side of his head. And this is, I think, more accurate to how he was at the end of the movie when he was fighting Dutch in the muddy puddles and all those traps. I think he didn't have his plasmacaster by then, and it was more of a hands-to-hands combat kind of thing. I could be wrong. I need to rewatch Predator, because it's been a while. I really like the design of the original Predator helmet. It's got a really cool, really sophisticated sort of helmet design, I think. And I'm going to swap his head now so you guys can see what it'll look like with this on the figure. So the way you do that is, it's always a little bit scary pulling off ball joints and stuff like that, but it's not too hard on this guy. What you got to do is you got to grab him as close as you can by the head to the bottom of the head near that ball joint, and same with his body. Grab him as close as you can to that, nice and firmly, and pull them apart. So I tend to pull his head back a little bit because that's where I can get the most leverage to do that, and it pulls off just like that. So it can be a little concerning sometimes, but I haven't broken anything on him yet except with this little doohickey in the gun. So actually a bit, quite a lot is broken on him. So maybe don't take my word for it, but whatever. And then you get the ball joint and you kind of position it so it's nice and centered, and you find the little hole at the bottom of his head here and do the opposite. So nice and firmly find that ball joint, and sometimes it makes a clicking sound, sometimes it doesn't when you're trying to put it on. There we go, it clicked and it's on, and now he has his helmeted head. So it's really cool that we do get a second head for this guy, which I really like this one. I'm probably gonna have, actually I'm on the fence about which face I'm gonna have him displayed with. I like both of them equally, I think, because I really like this masked version of him. But I do really like the open helmet one as well. Maybe that's just a sign that I need another Predator figure in my collection. Who knows? Just so I can have one of each. Maybe I'll get the one from the next Predator film, Predator 2, in my collection at some point, and then we can have his different faces off and on. But yeah, this is a really cool look for this guy, and he's just got that classic really large helmet. You can see all the little detailing painted on with, like, it looks like he's been shot in his helmet, and there's like a little blast point on his helmet where that was shot, but that's just painted on, but it looks really nice. Got those same really cool dreads going down at the back. You can even see all the sculpted detail of the actual Predator face around the mask. So that's a really nice touch there as well. Another thing I should show you guys is, because he does have these soft sculpted parts, they do tend to occasionally have issues, and his little skirt thing, cape, whatever you'd want to call it, on my one is actually coming off at the belt here, so something I will also have to glue back on there. So if you guys have any suggestions of what glue would work best for reattaching that, do let me know. For now, it's not completely falling off, but it's, you know, it's getting there. His sculpt actually incorporates this netting across his body, which is, you know, part of the classic Predator look. And I think, you know, I was worried because I've seen other Predator figures and, like, older NECA figures that had this netting, like, sculpted into the body and then painted over with black, have a lot of issues. I've seen it not be completely painted in before on a lot of cheaper and older NECA figures. But this one, they seem to have done a good job at actually completely painting all these black grids across his body. And even though he has articulation points across them, like on his chest and stuff like that, they do actually look complete most of the time, and that's actually done pretty well. So look down his legs. It's got this, again, that very nice worn armor kind of look going on, all painted really well. Got his feet there, black claws, and his sandals again. Underneath them, they have little peg holes, which is really good, but no detailing under the sandal, which is a bit of a shame, but a very minor thing. It's got more of the soft plastic for all these frilly things around his little crotch plate there. There's more of that netting across his chest. And he's got, again, those bones dangling off him and this little necklace thing, which is accurate to the film, though it should be hanging a touch lower than it actually can on this figure, from what I've seen it looking at photos, to how it was in the film. Again, that's a super minor thing, because despite that, this guy is super accurate. Let's briefly take a look at some more of his accessories. So like I was showing earlier, he does come with these cool little skulls, and they're really nicely detailed. They're both done in like a really worn, sort of old-looking skulls, and the sculpt on these is actually really nice. They look very realistic, so I do like these a lot. You can even see all that detail under them. It's beautifully done. So I love this thing, because you actually get a 7-inch NECA scale skull, two of them in this ultimate figure. So this one's a slightly different color, slightly more bluish gray compared to this one, more of a yellowy bone color, or even more of a pinky color, this one of the spine. But the skull looks to be the exact same sculpt, but they just kind of added the spine. This spine is weird. It looks a little bit short for a human spine, especially when you actually bring in a scale human, which the only one that I have from NECA at this point is actually the Arnold Schwarzenegger. You could think of him as the old Dutch from Predator, but he's actually the Terminator Genesis version of the Terminator. And this little skull that you can see, it scales with him really well, but then you get the spinal column, and it's really short. So a really short person with a big head must have had this body, just kind of odd, but strangely enough, you can actually just get Arnold to hold this, and it looks really funny. To be or not to be, am I right? But let's bring in the little other face mask. Yeah, like I said, it's pretty much identical to the one that he's wearing, so this is great if you want to put it in one of his hands while he's got his mask off to look like he's just holding it. It's sad because I wish that he would have actually come with a roaring face, because this guy, he's got a very closed kind of mouth in this look. It's a very classic, sort of, a very accurate look to how he was in a lot of shots in the film. But I would want one with like more open mandibles, so if this one came with a third head, that would make me a lot happier. But you know what, this one's still pretty cool as is, and it's got a lot of that detailing. I love the speckled paint on it and all that stuff, and all the detailing. It looks a lot better in person, I'd say, too, than probably how it's coming off on film, especially with my hand kind of shaking. It's a little bit hard to hold it in frame for you guys while trying to make sure it's actually in focus on my monitor, so sorry about that. But yeah, got that really cool mean expression and all the little details and stuff like that. Yeah, really nice. Here we've got another one of those open hands. This one is his right hand, I believe. So we got that again with that cool little glove, speckling on the skin, all nicely detailed. Looking really cool. And we got the hand that came stock on him on his left hand, and it's this one, a hand that would be holding something, which is really cool. So it's strange that we don't get a right hand that's holding something, because he's only got a fist on his right hand, which is kind of interesting, because this one isn't really designed to hold anything. By the looks of it, it's just like a closed fist with his thumb kind of sticking out. But then we've got this one, which is his left hand. So maybe the Predator is left-handed if you wanted to give him a spear or a gun or something weird to hold in there. But yeah, I got some nice painted detail again, that little glove there, which is missing a little bit of paint on this side, and actually has a bit of plastic just on his pointer finger here, which should be shaved off. So I have a little scalpel knife that can clean that off, because it's got a little bit of that flush from the mold that is actually still attached to there. So yeah, again, minor thing, but a little issue with this guy. Just before I conclude this review, let's do a quick size comparison of this Predator with some other NECA figures, some Alien figures, and some Godzilla figures, just so you guys have a good sense of how big he is. hope you like that little size comparison montage. I just threw it in there so you get a good sense of how tall this guy is. Again, he should measure about 7 inches or just over that because he is in that sort of scale. So we can quickly just bring in our ruler. You can see there he's just a bit taller than 7 inches, which is about... He's about 19 centimeters, give or take a little bit. So in conclusion, I'm gonna say I recommend this thing. He is a great representation of the classic 87 Predator. He is really detailed, his details are really on point, he's well painted, well put together, and he's just a great figure in general. Now, I have my gripes with this thing. I think the fact that his plasma caster is falling apart is really just not a good sign and not a good way for a figure like this to be made, basically, which is a real shame. I do have my little gripes about those pipes on his shoulder here falling apart, and this one being a little too short, and I would have liked to have seen an extra face go with this guy with an open mouth, which I know is asking a lot from a NECA figure like this, but this is meant to be the ultimate Jungle Hunter Predator, and considering that these ones are actually pretty pricey in my country, I don't think that's asking too much, but I could be wrong. Regardless, I think this is a great first Predator in my collection, and I think it would be in yours as well. So I'm going to give this guy a nice solid recommend, and I'm really eager to compare this guy to the ultimate Alien Big Chap figure whenever I can get that one in. I know it's released in the US currently, but I'm currently waiting till it's in stock in Big Bad Toy Store so I can get it shipped over with a bunch of other things. And when that does arrive, I'll do a review of that one, and I'll definitely compare these two. So yeah, that's about it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in a future video of mine. And until then, may all your vinyl be a radiated vinyl. Over and out.